Hello, hello. The NHL trade deadline is only a couple months away, and the trade rumors are starting to heat up and swirl around across the NHL. And the St. Louis Blues are actually an interesting team that could be looking to maybe add some NHL level talent while also trading away some of their current players or expiring contracts. So we've got a special guest on today, Sam from STL Analytics on Twitter or X, joining us to talk about trades. Which players should the Blues target? Could they maybe go after a big name like Elias Pettersson or Noah Dobson or Dylan Cousins? What would they or what should they be willing to give up in return for a player like that? And which of their players, like maybe Brandon Saad, should they trade away? We're going to talk about all that and more today on Note News.
Very nice. I like the new intro. Looks great.
Appreciate it, man. I think when we had you on before, that was like your first comment right out of the gate.
Yeah,
Was that you liked the intro, so we appreciate it.
that was cool.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, Sam. We're glad to have you again.
Yeah, of course.
Um, yeah, it's obviously John and Alec here with you, and we're joined by Sam today. We're going to talk trades. And if you're new to Note News and you haven't yet, we'd appreciate it if you would like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to listen, and you can follow and rate the podcast there. And then, as you can see over on this side of the screen, way over there, we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. So give us a follow there. But we got a special guest today, Sam. Thanks for coming on. How you doing? And why don't you let the viewers and the listeners know where they can find you and a little bit more about you?
Doing great. I'm happy to be back on. I had a really good time the first time I came on you guys' show. But yeah, doing pretty good. If you guys are on Twitter at STL Analytics, I've been teasing the website for a while. Haven't really gotten it to the point that I liked it yet, but currently working on tracking like microstats for Springfield Thunderbird games, and also going to do some more stuff with Blues prospects in the future. And I'm hoping to have all of that data be publicly available at some point. If you follow me, I've been posting about it on Twitter and pretty consistently showcasing some of the work, but at some point it'll be available in a database or website type form. So
Yeah, excited to see that whenever it's ready. Pretty excited time to be tracking Springfield stats. Like you said, we got Dvorsky on a heaters this season, and then Otto Stenberg coming over now. What are your thoughts on that, real quick?
yeah, really, really excited to see how that goes. It'll be really interesting because I think theoretically the SHL, the Swedish league where Stenberg was playing previously, and the AHL are pretty close on paper. But if you look at players who have gone back and forth between the two leagues, there's sort of a lot of variability
Mm-hmm.
in terms of performance. Like you'll see guys go from the SHL to the AHL and fall off the map, or you'll see guys go from the SHL to the AHL and explode. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what that's like for Stenberg.
Yeah,
I'm pretty positive about it. Like I think he's going to be pretty good. I think he's going to hit the ground running, but
yeah,
um, certainly excited to watch the guy. He's one of my favorites.
yeah. We're excited to see him as well. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. So today we're going to talk, as I said at the top, about the NHL trade deadline and what this could look like for the Blues this year. The trade deadline is a couple months away here as we record on January 12th. I believe it's on March 7th. If not the 7th of March, then some other time in March, but I believe it is March 7th.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, it's already been pretty active in the NHL when it comes to trades, right? Jacob Trouba,
hmm
that whole drama, some goalie moves out in Colorado, the David Jiricek trade to Minnesota. That was one that I would have hoped the Blues could maybe do to get a young defenseman and get the Jiricek brothers would have been kind of cool. But the Blues themselves have been active somewhat already as well. Acquiring Cam Fowler, which has been a huge help, and trading away P.O. Joseph. But Alec, I'm going to throw it to you first with sort of this more general question before we start to get into maybe who the Blues should trade away and who they should target. But let's sort of talk about how should Doug Armstrong and Alexander Steen, how should the front office as a whole and the team as a whole approach this trade deadline? Do you think they should look to buy? Do you think they should look to sell, or maybe some sort of modge podge of the two?
Yeah, I think that this trade deadline feels like it could be either very top heavy and really fun, or kind of boring and everyone is stuck in some kind of cap purgatory. And I think the big thing is going to have to not give up too much and not sacrifice the future when we're just starting to build something good here. If I'm being honest, if the Blues walk out of the trade deadline having made no moves, I don't even know that I would be that upset necessarily. Probably you'd like to see at least one smaller move, either addition or subtraction, depending on how the next month of play goes. But realistically, the trade market that talks that are heating up right now are really, really big names that are going to command a lot of prospect capital and draft capital too. And would definitely help the team to acquire some of these players. And I would certainly love if they were on the team. But at the same time, it would be a very tough look to sacrifice everything that we had, everything good we have going right now. Guys like Broberg, Holloway, who are helping the team win on relatively cheap contracts, to then restrict ourselves while still having some of those other big contracts that are not yet moved off the team. So I think it has to be more important about winning in the future than this season.
Sure. Sam, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I think it's interesting with the Blues because when you're predicting what's ahead in the next couple of months, it's kind of a wait and see game, but it's also they kind of need, if they want to act, they want to act now, especially if they're going to bring somebody in. I mean, I think you look at where they're at in the standings, they're 4 games back of a team that has 3 games in hand on them. That's a very big hill to climb. Like that's going to require like a month of awesome play to erase that hole. So, I mean, we're more than halfway through the season. So if they're going to bring in a guy to help the team now, they need to do it now. Like they can't wait till the trade deadline, which is why I've been kind of thinking that if we see the Blues go out and add something, it might be soon. But at the same time, I think if we see the Blues subtract stuff, it'll all depend on where we're at the trade deadline. Like let's say month and a half where we're still hovering around 500. I think that's when you start seeing guys start moving out the door. But it could go either way at this point. I'm not really totally sure to what to expect.
Sure. I'm sort of hoping it'll be a little bit of a combination of the two. I think it'd be really cool if they could, swing a big trade for a big name for sure. But I don't want them to sort of break the bank or anything like that to do it. But at the same time, you've got sort of this logjam of like aging defensemen and players that probably aren't going to be around for the long-term picture for this team that in a lot of ways have sort of, I guess, hampered the Blues or sort of hindered them in terms of spending and what they're able to do. I'm thinking like a guy like Justin Falk or something like that, of course. And then you've got some players whose contracts will be expiring soon. You've got some that'll expire at the end of this season, some at the end of next season. And I think those are the kinds of contracts and kinds of players that they should be maybe looking to move and see what they can get in return for it. I think it would be smart on their part to sort of play both sides a little bit. I know Doug Armstrong hates not making the playoffs and wants it so bad this season. We've seen that from him in some of what the team has done, of course, but also from some of his comments himself. So, I think that energy is good to have when it comes to building a winning culture. And I don't think I'd be upset if we saw them buying a little bit. But I don't want that sort of, I'm not going to say like greediness, but that sort of drive to get to the playoffs to be so strong that it requires giving up something that could be here for the long term and could help this team out a lot. But that said, if you want to acquire good talent, you gotta give some away, of course. But my next question for y'all, we can start with Alec. What goals do you think the Blues should be looking to accomplish this trade deadline? What sort of holes should they be looking to fill? Maybe they should address specific needs like defense or special teams or maybe even center depth. Do you think they should try to load up for a playoff push? Do you think maybe they should be looking to accumulate some draft capital? What goals do you think the Blues should try to accomplish this trade deadline?
So sort of similarly to what I was saying earlier, I think the big thing for me is no rentals, with the caveat of no rentals without the chance of extension. If it's someone who clearly is on, an impending UFA and has no interest in re-signing with the team, then I don't know that like acquiring even a valuable asset in a playoff push is really going to help this team. I mean, maybe they can compete in the West, but it just feels so far out of the question for not even being in a playoff spot right now. So, excuse me. If you are going to trade for a player with a excuse me, who is an impending UFA, I would hope that then the priority would be to extend that player, but that does happen not super often. But you never know. And yeah, I guess on the other point, for the most part, unless it's a major shakeup, either trading away a big contract or I can't even picture it. It just feels a little improbable for the trade deadline. But unless it's a major shakeup, I don't know that I'd necessarily touch the blue line because they're already fighting for minutes for guys like Scott Perunovich. Adding another big contract into that mix means that people are going to have to go, and it's just really hard to guarantee that a deal like that can get done. Like it can get pulled, in the minutes and days leading up to the trade deadline end. So unless you make the corresponding move first, I don't know that bringing in someone to help resolve the defense. It's a very risky move, I would say. But if you can trade away a big contract, or if you can acquire just like a gotta have it talent, then there's nuance to this discussion.
Yeah,
which we'll get into.
Yeah, the Blues defense has looked fantastic. So I don't know if you want to shake it up hugely, like you said. Sam, do you have any thoughts here on what the Blues should be trying to do this trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Alec with what he said about the blue line. I mean, I think we're not going to see a move there. Fowler's been really good. I think that was the move. He's been everything the team needed. They needed somebody who could drive offense from the blue line. They've gotten it in spades. Broberg's been great since Fowler came back. Parayko's been great. I'm not a huge fan of Falk, but whatever. And Suter and Tucker, Perunovich, the bottom pair guys, those guys have given the Blues great minutes this season too. I mean, Tucker's came up and has been awesome besides his first game, he's been perfect. So I don't really see a move coming there. The way I look at it with the Blues and what they should be trying to do, it kind of all comes back to one big goal. And I've kind of thought this for a while, but they really need another top player at some point. They got one, or they got two with Broberg and Holloway, but I think they need one more, and I think I think they're going to have to get it some point in the next calendar year. So if you can do that at this deadline, I think that should be the goal. If obviously getting a player like that in season, it really rarely happens, so I'm not really expecting it to happen. But if you can't do that in the season, I think your goal needs to shift to being able to get that player in the off season. And so the way for the Blues to do that is they're going to have to clear a little bit of cap. The cap's going to go up a lot next year. I can't remember exactly what it is. It might go up as much as, I saw like 97 million or something like that yesterday, which would be incredible. But even still, if you're going to be investing a lot of money in a star player, you're going to have to move some of the guys that are making some money. So I think if that player's not available now, you might start wanting to clear the deck for that player. But in the meantime, like, we're still trying to make the playoffs too, right? Armstrong's shown that's the main goal for the season. He went out and got Fowler. He added like 8 guys to the roster this summer. So if he can go out and find a way to get some cheap goal scoring, especially someone who can help the power play, and traditionally that's not been too hard to find. Just cheap goals off of, hasn't been too hard to find. So I think we might look into something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I like that point about trying to make some room and clear some cap space. Your point as well about the Blues just sort of needing some kind of top player, star player, like a legit guy, a dude. Some people might say. That's something that we've talked about a lot. It just feels like the secondary scoring on this team is really solid, and they seem like a pretty deep team when it comes to those secondary players and those sort of depth contributors. But it does feel like they're just one star player or a couple top players, like you said, short of becoming a legit team. And so would be fantastic if we could see them,
Yeah.
Make that kind of acquisition. Like you said, doesn't always happen mid-season very often, but boy, would that be cool. That would be cool for sure. Why don't we start talking about some specific players and specific trades here? We're going to start with Blues players that are currently on the team that we sort of think could be, or maybe expect that the Blues will trade these guys away. What should the Blues be looking in return for these guys? And then, of course, before we close out, after this sort of Blues players away segment, we're going to talk about Blues targets, big and small. So we'll get into that in a bit. But first of all, who could the Blues trade away? It seems like the big name here is Brandon Saad, right? His contract is he doesn't have much left. He's got this season and next season, and then he's a UFA in 2026. And it feels like he is the main name that's been floating around, right? We've seen him on like trade block lists. We've seen some St. Louis journalists singling him out as a player that could be traded away. Alex, Sam, anyone have any thoughts on Brandon Saad leaving St. Louis? Do you think that's the right move, or do you think they should try and hold on to him? Do you think it could be a significant part of potentially a playoff push? What are your thoughts on Saad?
I think he's going to go at some point, but I'm less convinced. I mean, it was reported before the weekend, I think on Friday, that they're not really looking into moving him as much anymore. I still think he goes at some point, but it might be in the off season. In the meantime, though, they kind of need him. Obviously, he was not playing well at all. Honestly, the big thing was just his effort level and compete was non-existent for basically the entire month of November and December. But he's been a lot better lately. And I think what they have to do for the remainder of this year is they just have to hope that he keeps playing well. I mean, he's been really the best fit on that line with Thomas and Buchnevich. They haven't gotten much from Neighbors or the other guys who they put up with there. I think at some point they probably need to move him because, like I was saying earlier, he is one of those guys that's making a lot of money next year. Like I think it's 4.5 next season. Mm-hmm. That's quite a lot of money to eat. So, I would be I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded, but I also, if the Blues are trying to make the playoffs, I think the best option is to just hope that Brandon Saad can continue to be somewhat productive and then reevaluate in the summer. But I could also totally see him going. I mean, it's like a wait and see.
Yeah. Alec, thoughts on Saad?
I think on Saad, it's probably almost a coin flip at this point. If he stays or goes, I think a lot of it has to do with play also of the team, like team record also. Yeah. Because if they start losing more than they're winning, even the next like 2 or 3 weeks, then I think it probably is someone that gets looked to ship more for track record than anything else. Because his like finishing has just been so bad this year, which is normally like the highlight of what he could do. So yeah, I would say it's not super. I don't know. I think it's unlikely that he gets traded, but I wouldn't be that surprised. Maybe a little under a 50% chance, just to throw something out there. But yeah,
it does feel like a toss-up at this point for sure. If anyone is watching live and has thoughts on any of the players we're naming or wants to throw a proposal in the chat, I think we'll at least devote some time before we end to discuss some of those if they are in the chat. Brandon Saad has been seeing a lot of top line minutes lately. He's been on Robert Thomas's wing up there. He had the hat trick the other night. So maybe he's starting to look okay, but it has been a somewhat disappointing season for Saad, who, like up to this point, we thought was you just plug him in anywhere and he'll score 20 plus, right? That hasn't really been the case this season. It's been more frustrating, but he's been on the top line. And at first, I thought it was kind of a sign that they wanted to trade him, right? He's getting more attention. He's playing alongside a better player. Maybe his production would look better, elevate his value a little bit, and maybe they could look to move him out. But at this point, maybe they're just trying to make it work. Like you said, both of you, maybe he could be a part of what they're trying to do, and they just need him to become, the Brandon Saad of the past few seasons, and maybe that's what they're trying to unlock by putting him on the top line. I really do think it could go either way.
Yeah.
I've got you have something on that, Sam?
Not really. Just I agree with what Alex said earlier. It does depend how the Blues season goes too, because
For
like
sure.
if they really fall out of it, which I don't think is going to happen. I think they're going to be in it until the end. I think a team is going to be interested in Saad. He's a decent player.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I've got one proposal to throw at you here, and Matt in the chat said trade him for draft picks. That's sort of like, he seems like the type of guy that you would just flip for picks at this point, and I wouldn't hate that for sure. My proposal here, and it's made more interesting because he has a no trade clause this year, and he has a modified no trade clause next season. Becomes a 12-team no trade list next season, but trade clause this season, or sorry, no trade clause this season. So he would have to waive that before they can move him, of course. But my proposal here is trade him to a team like Pittsburgh that's sort of on the comeback a little bit. Could probably use another forward like Saad, who isn't elite or anything like that, but is just solid. Trade him in exchange, for something like a second round pick, maybe another pick, or some kind of B-level prospect, something like that. It feels like that's the kind of team that could be looking for someone like Saad to me. And it also seems like that's the kind of team that Saad might be willing to waive his no trade clause to go to. Go play alongside a Sidney Crosby and a Malkin, guys like that. It feels like that's the kind of situation that could maybe line up to me. Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Armstrong and Dubas are like probably best friends at this point with the amount they just back and forth throw random picks around.
Yeah.
Saad's actually from Pittsburgh too.
Yeah,
that's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it could make a lot of sense. And I see some comments in the chat. Yeah, the Blues don't have. I believe this upcoming draft they've got a first, a fifth, and a sixth.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So they could definitely use a second and a third, or something like that for sure. But that feels like a fit to me, and I wouldn't hate it either, because I feel like at this point Saad he's not producing a whole lot, and I feel like it would make sense to try and maximize his value at this point.
Yeah.
But like you said, Sam, if it doesn't happen this season, I think it will happen at some point. So maybe that could happen in the offseason or during next season. Any other names on the Blues that y'all want to highlight as players that maybe the Blues could look to trade away? I mean, I'm thinking someone like a Radek Faksa, right? He's on a 1-year deal, right? And maybe even someone who's on a similar deal to Brandon Saad in terms of having a season and a half remaining. I'm looking at like a Matthew Joseph, Sundqvist, Toropchenko, Nathan Walker, names like that aren't really huge, but provide a little bit of control and stuff like that for a team. Any names like that you wanna grab onto?
Yeah, I think Fox is the main one.
Sure.
I think even if the Blues are, I shouldn't say that, but I think even if the Blues are kind of in it, he still might be a guy who goes. I mean, he's fourth line center.
Yeah.
He's a good player. I like Fox. I wouldn't hate if they brought him back, but he's I can't remember how old he is. I think he's 30. He's got a $3 million contract. If the Blues eat 50% of it, that's a pretty valuable trade asset to really any team around the NHL, especially one that needs bottom six playoff help for centers. I think you could get a decent middle round pick for that. I think if he's definitely a guy, if the Blues sort of fall out of it, you look at that. I'm sure they'd love to move Matthew Joseph too. They got a third round pick just to take him. So I think if they traded him straight up, they would have to probably trade that third round pick. I don't mind Joseph either, but it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that they need to start clearing the decks for next summer, and he's got a $3 million contract. So I'm not expecting him to move. I just don't think there's going to be interest, but
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that they would love to move if someone was really interested. So
Sure.
we'll see.
Yeah, provides
Yeah, I
solid
was going to
depth, like
say
you
the
said.
same names. Hmm.
There is one player that comes up a lot. Well, two sort of two defenders here, two defensemen. We can start with Justin Falk before we get to the other one, who's maybe a little bit more hot button in Scott Perunovich. But Justin Falk is sort of, Sam, you said earlier, not someone you're super crazy about, and he seems like the kind of guy that, I mean, he's got a big contract here. After this season, he's got two full seasons remaining at 6.5, and so that's a pretty sizable cap hit. And someone that I think the Blues, sort of him and Torrey Krug, right? They've tried to find a home for these guys. I don't think I don't think Justin Falk is going to be around long term for this team. Do you think the Blues will try to find a home for him? Do you think they could? Like, do you think anyone would even take him? Because I mean, he's fine, right?
See, I don't know if it happens because I think they like him. If you look
Hmm.
at average ice time under Monty, I'm not sure what it's been lately, but he was playing a ton when Monty took over. So he seems like a guy who the Blues, in my opinion, wrongly really like. Um, we'll see though. Like maybe they reevaluate in the summer, and they've got kind of a three-headed monster up top with Pareko, Broberg, and Fowler, and Falk's kind of the guy where it's like, okay, you played on the top power play all season, you played first pairing minutes all season, and you have 10 points midway through the season.
Yeah.
uh, I think maybe that's something you revisit in the summer. I mean, I'm hoping they revisit it in the summer. I'd be shocked if it happens now, just because he's playing so many minutes and the team's fighting for the playoffs. But um, we'll see. Maybe that's something that happens in the summer.
Sure.
I think the other thing about Falk is sort of similarly that just makes it so hard to move in season versus at the off season. I think that could actually be something they really sort of aggressively pursue. But who is going to take those second line minutes if
Yeah.
Falk does get moved? Like, who would you really realistically want playing next to Broberg?
Hmm.
Is that like how
Matthew
they
Kessel.
put? He's the only other right shot defenseman not named Colton Pareko. So, but is he ready for second line minutes? Well, I guess we would see, but we are not gonna see. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like Falk is. I would be very surprised if they moved on this season. I think Perunovich is someone that I feel like with just how he's being deployed, or rather not being deployed, it feels like they kind of are trying to move off of Perunovich. The thing is, realistically, I think you'd only get like a late round pick for him, anyways. So is that really even an addition to get a guy who has a chance to contribute? Um, I don't know. I guess there's cases for and against it, but
Yeah, I feel like the big word with Perunovich this season, like frustrating, maybe befuddling is another one.
I like befuddling.
We've sort of maybe even agonized over this to some extent on Note News before, for sure. Like he's someone that has had a pretty good season by his standards. When you look at his career so far, the Blues on ice results with him playing on the ice, they look pretty good on both ends, I feel like. But I don't track stats as closely as Sam does. Sam, what are your thoughts on Perunovich? Like, do you think he's someone that they should be utilizing more, at 5-on-5 as well as on maybe the power play too? Or do you think he's a candidate um, of the kind of player that they look to move either via trade or in the offseason, just let him go at some point?
Yeah, I've kind of resigned to Perunovich's fate. I thought he was really, really good when he played, but
Yeah.
it's clear that he doesn't really have a future here, which it's too bad. But at the same time, once they got Fowler and they got Broberg back, they don't really need him as much because those guys can tilt the ice too. And Tucker's been really good on the third pair, so it's not gut wrenching when he's not in the lineup like it was earlier in the season. So I think at some point he's probably going to ask Armstrong for a fresh start, and he's going to go to I don't know, San Jose and score 45 points next year.
Yep.
But
Yep.
Whatever. It's fine. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. I guess that's another term that has been surrounding Perunovic lately. It feels like.
Yeah.
Any other last names, like any blockbusters that you think the Blues should look to move, or do you think in some universe could happen? Do you think they trade Jordan Bennington or anyone like that?
Not for me.
I don't know.
Nothing fun.
I'm not really expecting any of the big names on the roster to go anywhere unless it's in return for another big name. So it's kind of hard to project. I think the goalie situation could get interesting this summer, though. Honestly, I'm a little worried that if they don't get Hofer done, I think somebody's going to offer sheet him. But worry about that down the road. I think that could come to a head at some point, but I don't really think either of those goalies this year have been outstanding anyways. So
they haven't, for sure. Yeah.
I can't really project a trade or move with either of those guys.
All right. No blockbusters yet. Yeah. Hofer is someone that they need to feel like they need to go ahead and pay for sure. And it feels like if Binnington and Hofer were the Binnington and Hofer of last season, they would definitely be in a playoff spot. But it is what it is.
That was unfair to expect, though. I mean, last season they were they were superhuman last year.
Yeah, they were lights out.
They've been fine this year. Just they're not winning us games like they did last year.
Sure, for sure. I guess that wraps up our Blues roster talk. Let's talk about some players that maybe the Blues could look to target. I want to preface this discussion by saying some of these names we aren't expecting to happen. We aren't like
most
we don't
of these
think
names.
Most of these names, yeah, we'll say that. Most of these names, we don't expect, or maybe even all of them, I don't know. We don't expect the Blues to go out and get these players. We don't think this is something that they will do, especially when they're competing with other teams in the NHL for a lot of these guys. But this is sort of the time to maybe fantasize a little bit, get really hopeful. What would it take? Is it worth trying to get some of these guys? So we'll talk about bigger names like Elias Pettersson, maybe some more medium names. I got my eye on a couple Sabres guys, and maybe even a couple. We'll throw in a couple realistic ideas here as well. Just something that isn't crazy for sure. But before we get into it, if you have any thoughts on the players we're mentioning, or any players out there that you think the Blues should target, throw them in the chat. And if we've got some good ones, we'll make sure to discuss those as well. And if you're new to Note News and you're enjoying us so far, then like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We go live at least once a week, very often twice a week. And we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And you can see over on this side of the screen where we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. So we post a lot of other exciting stuff and announcements when we're having fantastic guests on, like Sam here. So be sure to check us out on all those platforms. But yeah, we appreciate everyone tuning in. I want to start off with a category that I'm calling the big fish. All right. And I figured we should just go ahead and get into it right now.
Sure. Let's do it.
The big sort of story, the real scandal around this year's trade deadline seems to be out west in Vancouver. You can find all sorts of stories online about it, so we don't have to get into it here. But the Vancouver Canucks could be looking to move on from one of both or neither of these guys, but there is some drama, and they are shopping these guys. They're listening to offers on Elias Pettersson and JT Miller, a couple star centers for them. The two of those guys, for those who don't know, they're just not getting along. There's some drama in the locker room and stuff like that. And so 2-star players, 2-star centers. I want so badly for them to get Elias Pettersson. And again, like I prefaced, I don't think this is necessarily going to happen, but I mean, we discussed it already. The Blues need a star, and they need a legit dude, someone who can play, top minutes, be a top scorer for this team. And this feels like a way to go and get it. This opportunity doesn't happen all the time. He's locked up for a while, and it is a big contract, so it would take a lot of crafty moves and some cap some cap sort of finagling, I guess, to make it work. But I feel like acquiring a guy like Pettersson would be huge for this team. It addresses so many holes. We talked after the Panthers won the Stanley Cup over the summer, Alec and I did, about maybe how the Blues could build a contender. And it feels like getting a guy like Pettersson would be huge. Like the last time something like this happened, it felt like it was Matthew Tkachuk going on the market, right? And when the Panthers acquired him from the Flames, people were hesitant to take on a big contract like that. But the Panthers and Bill Zito just went out and got it done. They executed a big trade, and I think at the time people were like, "You're giving up all that for him?" Well, now it looks like they won the trade, obviously, and so I don't know. What do y'all think on Elias Pettersson? We can get into a little bit more about like what it would take in a second, but I mean, he's on an 8-year contract, $92.8 million, so $11.6 million average annual value. That's pretty big, and he's got a no move clause that kicks in next season, so he's still eligible to be traded this season. But yeah, we can start with you, Alec. What are your thoughts on Pettersson?
Absolutely, I'm with you. Give me the Swede, please.
Yeah. It's a Swedish
Yeah,
connection too.
that would be such a dynamic 1-2 center punch that they could use, or even yeah, and just I would love nothing more than you're right. Like it feels like the elite level player that this team needs, and the thing that was sort of talked about when Matthew Tkachuk came on the market, and now that Elias Pettersson is potentially on the market, players like this don't come on the market. Like opportunities like this don't present themselves, once every couple years even. Like that's not a guarantee. The package would be steep, and I guess we can get into that in a second if that's what you want. But like I just he's such a talented player at like the most valuable position of the skaters at as a center, and yeah, his contract is hefty, that's for sure. But especially if they can do some cap finagling to move off from some contracts this off season, like the caliber of player this could be, especially with some of the up and coming skaters the Blues have. Like I think a Dylan Holloway would just be so fun playing on the second line with Pettersson. Like absolutely, I would make that move.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys say. I think in theory he's perfect. I've been talking for a long time. We need that top level player, but it's so hard because it's like you don't know when those guys are going to be available. It's unpredictable who's it's going to be.
Yeah.
So the thing with Pettersson though, which I think is a little concerning, is that he hasn't really been that good for the last 80 or so games, like a full season's worth of games.
Since he was extended, right?
I think he's got like 59 points in his last 82 games. So that's a little concerning, but he didn't just get bad overnight, right? I mean, at the top of his game, he's 100-point Selke level center. Those guys are absolute unicorns. I mean, he fits the Blues perfectly, right? He's same draft year as Thomas. He's a center. He's a great player on the power play. He would fix our power play.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's locked up. I mean, if he plays up to how he is, 11 million is nothing. Like, who cares? But I mean, that is something you have to assess, though, is that he really hasn't been that great in the last season's worth of games. Now, that being said, he's also been injured. He's had lingering injuries.
Is a thing.
Yeah. And maybe just JT Miller sucks, too. And it just drags him down so much that he just can't play his game. And I don't know. I think it would be weird if he was just cooked or not the same player he is just randomly at 26. So I would be surprised, but I think you have to treat him like he's the superstar he is. And I mean, he'd fit us perfectly.
Yeah, like you said, he would fix the power play. That's like one of the biggest things to me is just like, I just like fantasizing about, what he could do for our special teams would be fantastic. And he's a solid two-way player, like you said, someone who could potentially like get some Selke consideration at some point. But obviously taking on an $11.6 million per year contract would be huge. So what do you think, Sam, I'll ask you first, like, what do you think it would take to get Pettersson? Whether it would be the right or wrong move, like what would it take? And let me throw you my proposal first. You can let me know your thoughts on this, or if you have something entirely different, feel free to throw that out as well. So they need to move some significant cap out to acquire him. So I'm saying Jordan Kyrou goes the other way, can provide some solid forward depth for the Canucks. Still a scorer, of course. And then I feel like they're going to want a center in there. So I'm thinking like Zach Dean, maybe even add an Otto Stenberg in there. Maybe it would take Dvorsky instead of one of those guys. That would be tough. And then plus draft picks if that's necessary. But yeah, what do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I think you're kind of on the right track. That's the thing is, if they were to do it in season, it would have to balance the cap would have to balance out. And I thought kind of hard about this before we started recording. There's not really a good way to do it without Jordan Kyrou. It almost has to be Kyrou, which sucks because Kairou's been so good. But I think you start with Kyrou, and I think they probably want Dvorsky.
Yeah.
I think realistically, you probably have to give up both, but
sure,
we'll see. Maybe you can wrestle them out of that and move it down to a lesser prospect. But yeah, something like that. I was like the other way you could maybe do it is if you throw Saad in there, you throw Joseph in there. That's $8 million. You still need $3 million more to make it balance. Like Nick Leddy, I don't know. That seems kind of Xboxy to me at that point.
Yeah, I mean, so like the Blues currently have about 3.5 in cap space, so that helps a little. But I mean, you could even trade Matthew Joseph away for nothing. Like just trade him away for future considerations or something, and clear up about $3 million with that. But you're right, it is tricky when it comes to the money. But Alec, any additional thoughts here before we start to talk about someone else?
I agree. I think the package starts with Kyrou, and I agree. I think that first of all has to happen for cap reasons. Second of all has to happen for Canucks reasons. Like I don't think they would accept anything else without like, like when the Panthers acquired Matthew Tkachuk, they gave up Huberdeau, who was a 100-point player the season previous. So yeah, which Kyrou is really showing signs of being a much more complete player. So that would really stink to give him up now, because I don't know if he'll ever quite hit the century mark, but looks like he could have 90-point potential. I would say what I would propose would be a package that starts with Kyrou plus this year's first, and then go from there. Whether or not I think Kyrou plus this year's first plus Dvorsky, that does immediately
That's quite
sound
the offer,
like a haul to give up.
That might get it done.
Oh, I think that would absolutely get it done. And I think that sounds terrible to give up right now. But the thing you have to think about is, number one, Dvorsky as a prospect does look really good. I don't know that being Elias Pettersson is ever in his ceiling.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know that defensively he can ever do what Pettersson does. And offensively, maybe he could get close at the 90th or 99th percentile outcome. But like, we've waxed poetic about what Pettersson is as an NHL player. But whether it's Kyrou plus a first plus, a Stenberg, I like that idea. Or if they want Stansel, or I don't know, someone else who's sort of an up and coming prospect, then maybe you could do like a Pekarchik and a Dean, or I don't know. But yeah, I would start with Kyrou in a first.
Gotcha. All right, Alec, why don't you take the next one? You've got your eye on an Islander, right? What do you got here?
Yeah, so I said that it is unlikely that the blue line gets shaken up and all, and I think that's the right thing. However, if there's a player like Noah Dobson who could be moved, I would make that move, because I see Noah Dobson as an up-and-coming two-way defenseman who already got paid for the most part. Like he's making a lot of money, $4 million now, and that number is gonna skyrocket into the future. So like the contract is going to be hefty, but it isn't so much that it can't be moved. And for some reason, it sounds like maybe that they are interested in moving or are looking at moving Noah Dobson, which is crazy to me, because I think he's someone that absolutely you could play anywhere in the top 4 and he'd just be a huge value add. The only thing that is worrying potentially about Dobson is that he's less involved, more of a secondary assist guy than like a primary play driving. But I think there's enough there as a 25-year-old defenseman, right shot defenseman, by the way, that I would definitely be interested in trying to acquire Dobson. So the way that I sort of structured this deal was similar to the from last offseason, I believe, the Jacob Chikrin trade to Washington, because I think they're sort of similar guys. I think Chikrin is better defensively, a little bit older, a little bit more proven, and had definitely been a lot more interest around the league. But I still think there's enough there that it sort of can work as a guide here. So what I proposed was you could, for cap reasons, give them Saad at a retained salary, probably somewhere between 20 to 33%, depending on I don't know, depending on their ask, as well as a decent level prospect. I threw in Kaskamaki, but that could be a Yeko or maybe a Stancil. Maybe he's not decent anymore. I don't know. As well as like I had it at next year's 3rd round pick, but that could also be another prospect that could even be. I don't think they would want like a Matthew Joseph, but right now the Islanders are not playing well. They are very far. Well, I guess they're still only 1 game under 500, but they're pretty far out of the playoff race. They're 6 points behind, or 5 points behind the Jackets, I guess.
Yeah. Man,
the East is so weird this year. But they're pretty much out of it for the season, it seems like. And I think that Dobson is would be a really valuable add to this. Now, maybe they don't want, for that reason, they don't want like Saad to get it done now. Maybe it would take a higher level prospect, or even a player like a Zach Bolduc, who's an up and coming forward for us, or potentially a prospect that hasn't yet graduated like Bolduc. But yeah.
Nice.
I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if they traded Dobson. I think those guys are unicorns. I think he had like 70 points last year from right 70. Defense, and I agree. He's not. I wouldn't say he's a dominant 2-way defenseman. He's a really good player, but like those guys are unicorns. Like I'd be shocked if they traded him, and I think the price would be a little higher too. But I mean, if he's available, that's definitely someone the Blues should be after.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. Need some nice right shot defense. Like a pairing of Broberg and Dobson would be fun.
Yeah, that would be a good pairing.
That would be pretty sweet. I like it.
That'd be an offensive monster. Goodness gracious.
That'd be crazy.
By the way, Dobson this year is 21 points, 42 games. So kind of a down season for him as well.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, he was so good last year.
Yeah, the Islanders have kind of not had a great season. It's been rough for hockey in New York.
Yeah.
Sam, if you want, this could be, if you want to, do you have a guy that you want to throw in there as a potential target for the Blues now that I've suggested Pettersson and Alex has gone on Dobson?
Looking at it from like a big name perspective, not really. I think that's more of an off-season thing. I think Pettersson, since his name is there right now, I think that's the one that has is kind of realistic. The other names that I would bring up, I think you're looking at more in the summer. Mm-hmm. Obviously Mitch Marner is going to UFA this summer. What if those guys in Buffalo who've played there for 8 years and haven't seen the playoffs once are like, okay, I'm done with this, and Tage Thompson's available. Like obviously that's not happening now, but it's a big what if, and it's
right.
Brady Tkachuk, right? It's okay. I've been in Ottawa since 2018 and haven't sniffed the playoffs yet. And then one guy I think is kind of interesting to monitor too is Evan Bouchard in Edmonton. I think obviously everyone knows how great he is, but he's up for I think his contract is expiring this summer, and he's gonna want to get paid like a number one. Will the Oilers want to pay him like a number one? Obviously, they value him a ton as a player, but I think that's an interesting question to look into this summer. But until then, I think Pettersson is kind of the guy where if the Blues were going to swing on a top guy, he's the one who actually could happen. And then the others are just sort of wait and see.
Right. Well, you sort of on that Buffalo note, a couple young guys that I want to talk about, and we can sort of talk about them as a group, as a package here. A couple names that have been sort of thrown around in trade talks: Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram. Obviously, one forward and one defenseman. A lot of mixed takes on whether these guys would be worth acquiring. On the point of Cousins, he's got a bit of a tough contract, 7 years and $7.1 million AAV. So he's got 5.5 remaining on that one. He's in year 2. He's not great defensively, but the Blues would be buying low on a young NHL level player with upside. Sort of these guys fall in a similar bucket to me as Holloway and Broberg in terms of what they could do to the Blues timeline, acquiring NHL ready talent that can still stick around for a while. Of course, Bowen Byram is an RFA after this season. But the Sabres are a bit desperate, and they have a lot of money already tied up on their blue line. He's sort of got an offensive profile. In 43 games played this season, he's got 5 goals and 17 assists, so 22 points. Do you guys think it would be worth acquiring either of these guys? It would probably take a couple of solid young forwards or forward prospects. Like I'm wondering if like Neighbors would have to go the other way. A Stenberg or a Yeko or a Pekarchik, probably some picks as well. But what are your guys' thoughts on both of these guys?
I probably stay away. I mean, it's tough. Like the profile that Cousins has is obviously really enticing. He's a 6'3" center, ton of skill, can skate really good.
So fast.
I don't know. I don't think he's that good. I think that one season where he got 70 points, I think that was kind of a mirage. That whole team that year had really jacked shooting percentages. I mean, we're like 100 games past that season now, and hasn't been close to the same player. Byram's an interesting one because at least from a numbers perspective, he doesn't drive offense or defense, but he's one of the best goal-scoring defensemen in the league, which is a really, really weird profile. So, I don't know. Maybe there's something there with him. I think it's risky, and honestly, I like Broberg more, and the Blues have some decent defenseman prospects coming.
Mm-hmm.
You could convince me on Byram, but I wouldn't be dying to go out and get him.
Yeah, he was the one I was thinking more so than Cousins for sure. Alec, thoughts on these Buffalo fellas?
I agree that they're a lot riskier just because everything in Buffalo for the past, you name the years, has just been so weird. I don't really like it. Almost feels like all of their metrics are just so skewed, and I can't figure out why. But I actually think that I think you're onto something, that they're risks worth taking, because I don't think the packages to get them would be heartbreakers like Pettersson or Dobson or Tage Thompson or whatever anyone might be. That being said, arguably, would they help the team? They would help, but like, would it really raise us to another level? There's definitely an argument there, but I do think I would probably look into the moves without doing too much, because with Cousins, his tools are so fascinating. I think there's enough there. Either if you play him as a center, I think there's an avenue for him to not take on the responsibility he has in Buffalo and play as more of a 2 or even a 3C. Now, that wouldn't be as much ice time, but maybe he needs to just get it. First of all, change of scenery, and second of all, change of responsibility to allow himself to develop a little better. Or potentially, honestly, with his size and like skating ability on the wing, I think is a really enticing thought. Obviously, converting a center to a winger is immediately a drop in value, but I don't know. I think there's something there, and I think there's something there with Byram as well. Just his age and sort of what he's shown to this point. I think there's enough there that you could definitely talk yourself into. You could realistically expect this player to improve in a different system and benefiting with skating with new guys. But yeah, I'm not rushing to the table to make these moves, but I think they're worth exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty sure the Red Wings are interested in Cousins, and it feels like Red Wings and the Blues are in a similar spot. I mean, I guess the Red Wings probably have some more exciting young talent, but just in terms of sort of the caliber of players that they should be targeting, probably in a similar area. Alec, do you have any other sort of middle-ish to big-ish names that you wanna touch on before we talk about maybe some more like realistic players that we think the Blues might actually go for?
The last one that I've seen brought up that I think is interesting is Trent Frederick. And the reason that it's interesting is because of what I said at the beginning of the show, that I wouldn't take expiring contracts, and he is a pending UFA. So it almost wonder if it would be worth just to pay him in free agency. But the thing is, I think he's going to command a pretty large contract this offseason. And if you trade for him, you get the first chance to extend him. So that is sort of a major caveat here. But he's a middle sixer probably that has shown an ability to play a decent two-way game and really like be very physical too, which I think is very Blues hockey-esque, and I think would fit in really well on this team that could help him. A prospect for this would be something like next year's third, and then probably a prospect we can't really trade away further picks is the problem, why we have to trade away so many prospects, but that's because we have been hoarding prospects. And I think now would be the time, especially this offseason too, to deal from this position of strength in our deep but not really our deep in quantity but not as much in quality prospect pool. And when I say quality, I mean like
top guys.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of really interesting prospects. But anyways, so maybe something like next year's third, and then like a Yeko, or maybe Boston wants something like a Matthew Joseph or Radek Faksa as a center going the other way. Maybe they want to try and take on the Scott Perunovich reclamation project. And honestly, it'd probably be so good in Boston. But I would think Frederick could be a name that would excite me a lot more than a realistic move, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way about Frederick. I think the reason I have like a little bit of pause with Frederick though is it helps more this year than next year, I think, because I think he gets a little bit redundant in that forward group. I mean, right now though, he's a really good player. Honestly, if the Blues got him, I know Frederick's been more of a bottom six type guy in his career, but if they got him now, like I'd put him next to Thomas and Buchnevich and see what happens. He's good. He's got familiarity with Monty. He's obviously he's from St. Louis, so I think it would be pretty expensive to get him. I mean, look at what Ivan Barbashev has done in Vegas, and what Tanner Jeannot cost to get for Tampa a few years ago. I think it would be a similar move as like that. I think you might have to throw in some decent prospects to get him right now. So I think you maybe wait until the offseason and see if he's still there. But also, I mean, he would really help right now too. So I don't know. I like it. I think Frederick's a good player. I think it just gets a little complicated down the road because it's, we have a lot of prospects that project as sort of middle six physical guys. Yeah. Do we really need to pay a middle six physical guy right now? Maybe. I mean, he's good, and he'll be good next year and the year after because he's pretty young, but just stuff to think about with that one.
Sure.
I was looking at the Tanner Jeannot trade as sort of idea of a package, which The Lightning gave up, the Kings gave up a fourth and a second, a future, like next year's second. So I'm thinking like next year's third and a decent prospect and maybe one more. It's somewhere around that.
Yeah, when Nashville traded him though to Tampa, they got like 6
Oh,
picks.
gotcha. Yeah,
They got
yeah.
and one of them was a first round pick, which I think is this year's first round pick. I could be wrong. I think it would be pretty pricey for Frederick. Like I think they would probably have a pick of two of the two Blues prospects that they'd like, which I'm not super opposed to that, but it wouldn't be cheap, I don't think.
Sure. Well, real quick, any realistic names? I've got a couple in mind, but do y'all have any ideas of someone who the Blues could actually look to target that you think would actually be within the realm of possibility that the Blues would go out and get him? I've got a couple names in mind. Like I'm looking at, I think, okay, first of all, sort of on your last point, Alec, I think it would be fantastic to go and get someone in a trade like a Provorov, like someone like that is a legit guy, but he's on an expiring contract. Like that's someone I want them to target in free agency. So I don't think they should go and get someone that's on an expiring contract like that. Just in my opinion. So I mean, a couple names that I'm looking at, and these aren't like break the bank, like fantastic players or anything like that, but like Zach Jones from the Rangers has been given permission to talk to other teams for a trade, and he's struggled a lot. He's not having a very good season. He's a left shot defenseman. Not that the Blues need that, but he's a young guy. In 26 games, he's got a goal and 7 assists, so not a huge difference maker or anything like that. But another guy that I think could be interesting is a left winger from Philadelphia, Joel Farabee, who last season played all 82 and had 50 points. This season in 42 games only has 14, so not having a fantastic season. But I think the Blues could be interested in acquiring some forward depth like that. But any ideas or any takes on those two names or anyone else?
I think with Jones, I like Zach Jones, but I think it's kind of the same thing as Perunovich, where it's a good player, but the coach is. I think basically every single NHL team has their version of Scott Perunovich, where it's a sub 6 foot defenseman who's really good at getting the puck up the ice. The team keeps the puck for most of his shifts, but the coach is, a couple times a season, a guy out muscles them, and the coach gets scared that that's going to happen, and he doesn't want to play him. Like Philadelphia has Emil Andre, the Rangers have Zach Jones. I'm sure there's other guys. The Stars have Nils Lundqvist.
Yeah.
I think it would just kind of fit that role. Farabee's an interesting one, though. I think it's sort of the same deal as Frederick, where he's going to get redundant really fast, and he's got a contract for longer than this year. But I think Farabee's a good player, and I would be interested to see what he could do with a change of scenery. It sort of seems like John Tortorella does not like him, and he's really fallen off there. So I'd be interested in him, but not dying to get him. But that's a decent name. I hadn't thought of him, but
sure.
I've been dreaming a Flyers trade for I feel like 3 seasons now, forever, to get one of their like young guys. But yeah, the thing with Farabee is he's under contract for 3 more years, so almost 4 years, and at $5 million isn't really that much. But when we're talking about trying to clear salary for this off season, it just feels like maybe right guy but wrong time sort of move. But yeah, I would say someone in that sort of bottom 9 scoring winger. I have, if not just for sentimental reasons, I've definitely seen in some circles online a David Perron reunion.
I was gonna bring him up.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that.
I'm looking in right now what his contract is, if he is more than just this year.
I saw one that was Ottawa gets Nick Leddy, Blues get David Perron. I would do that.
Yeah, I think that's Piranha. It's almost perfectly. My philosophy for trade was either go big or go super cheap.
Yeah.
And I think Perron would be super cheap, and he helps an area that you really need help on. I mean, I haven't really seen much of him the last couple of years. I imagine he's taken quite a few steps back because he is, I think he was drafted in 2007, so he's pretty old. But he's, at least when he was here the last time, he was arguably the best right-hand shot power play forward in the league, and I think you can still be pretty good on the power play even as you lose steps in skating and lose the ability to connect plays at even strength. It would be interesting to see if the Blues brought David Perron back and stuck him on the left circle the way he was under Monty the last time he was here. It'd be interesting. Obviously, he's been out most of the year.
Yeah.
And I don't even think he has a goal either.
No, he's got pretty, nothing.
He hasn't really played. He looks like he's still injured right now, so perhaps not on the docket. But
yeah.
Speaking of Ottawa forwards, I would still love a Shane Pinto trade also, but I think that's pretty unrealistic.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately.
Yeah. Real quick, we're gonna close out with some World Juniors talk because Sam, I know you watched a lot of World Juniors and stuff like that. But before we do, just want to go back through the chat. Someone mentioned an O'Reilly reunion. That could be interesting.
That could be very interesting
on the
That'd
reunion front. I feel like it would
if they would trade in division, which I don't know.
I think they're soft if they wouldn't trade in division. I look down on teams that wouldn't trade in the division.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think that would be interesting for sure. If you're taking minutes away from like a Sundqvist or something like that, I don't have any problem with
I'm
that.
sorry, but please take minutes away from Sundqvist. I'm going to say it.
Yeah. This is one that I've seen a lot, and a couple people have mentioned it in the chat. I've seen, and I agree with, I can't remember who said this. I'm having trouble finding it right now, but I have seen, and I agree with whoever said this, Bolduc's name put into trade rumors and stuff like that. Alec, we were texting last night. You are on the Bolduc hate train or something like that. That's probably a little strong. That's probably a little strong. But what do y'all think about
He's
about
younger
Bolduc?
than me?
What do y'all think about Bolduc?
He's younger than me, too.
Yeah.
He's younger than all of us. What do y'all think about giving up Bolduc? That was one question thrown in the chat.
I mean, I like Bolduc. I think he's been really good this year. Like pleasantly surprised at how good he's been this year, especially on the defensive side of the puck. But yeah, I mean, I think he is a guy. If a really good player becomes available, I'm not clamoring for the Blues to hold on to Bolduc. If a team really likes him and you can get a good established player for Bolduc, I have no problems with that. But also, I mean, I'm not itching to give him away. He's been really good this year. I mean, I've been happy with him.
Yeah, he's definitely elevated his ceiling. It feels like it feels like he could solidly establish himself as a middle six or maybe even top six winger, maybe like second line guy. But yeah, let's shift to talk about some World Juniors here. Alec, what questions do you got for Sam about the World Juniors?
Mostly, I just want to get sort of an overall like bird's eye view of how was your has your viewing of the World Juniors changed your opinions on any specific prospects, number one, and then also on the Blues system as a whole. Like, do you see that? Obviously, we all know like who stood out in the stat sheet, but were there any like play driving or whatever type stuff that you were really caught your eye, or do you just want to take the chance to rave about any specific prospects? And then also, do you think your expectations have changed at all from after the tournament?
Honestly, pretty much everybody who went to that tournament, I think, was about how I expected them to be. Although there are a couple guys who like Stancil, that was the best hockey he's ever played. And I think it might be fair to change expectations about him a little bit. I mean, he went back to the WHL a couple nights ago and scored 5 points against the Prince George Cougars, who are a loaded team with a bunch of 19-year-old top prospects. They're one of the favorites in the West this year. He goes back. Stonsel's team just traded Andrew Cristall and Caden Price. Tisha Ginla's out for the year, so the 3 other big names on his team are gone. It's just Stonsel, and he drops 5 points on them. So scored again last night too. I think he's a guy who it might have just clicked for, and I'm not totally sure what his ceiling is, but he definitely opened my eyes because it wasn't just the stat sheet too. I mean, he could have probably had 15 points in that tournament. He hit the post 4 times, made a bunch of plays. The guy's 6'4", really good hands, dual threat, and he could shoot a puck through a car door. So, I think that's a guy who I don't think typically when you're evaluating prospects, you don't want to let a short tournament really shift your evaluation of them. But that's a guy who was so good that honestly, I think it's fair to shift it a little bit. And the other guy I was pleasantly surprised by was Adam Juracek. Obviously, this is his first real hockey in a long time, and you could really tell, especially early in the tournament, he just didn't really seem like he had the feel for it as much. I mean, he was just, chasing guys and missing some checks and missing some passes, but I thought he got better every single game of the tournament. He led the checks in ice time in the bronze medal game. He was really zipping outlet passes, and I love how competitive he is defensively too. Like, he takes the body, he's really good with the stick. His reads are generally pretty good. I think they'll get better as he plays more and more hockey too. I was really impressed with what he could be. Obviously, there's a long way to go with him. I think he's pretty raw, and that's to be expected because he missed an entire year of hockey. But I was really impressed. On the offensive game side of the game, I think there's more work for him too. I mean, I saw a stat. He took 25 shots at the World Juniors, and I mean, he unloads, which is kind of fun. But not one of those shots was from medium or high danger. They were all from low danger. So he's got to figure out how to be a little bit more involved on the offensive side to be a top 4 guy. But I mean, what he showed at that tournament, I was really impressed. And I think next year he's going to go back to that tournament. He's going to be awesome. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, keep that one on the schedule for sure. Super exciting stuff. And we got Stenberg coming over. We talked a little bit about that at the top. But Dvorsky as well looked pretty good. I just want to get your thoughts on him real quick before we close out. But do you think we'll see him sometime this season? If so, where? And if not, do you think we'll see him next season?
Yeah. Just to start with Dvorsky at the World Juniors, honestly, I thought he was pretty disappointing for the first couple games. Against Sweden, which obviously is a tough one, and Switzerland, he was kind of sort of pinned in his zone the whole time, but he dumped a bunch of points on Kazakhstan, and then he was awesome against Finland. He was so good. Almost brought his team back. Him and Pekarchik both. They were so good in that game. I don't really think he changed my expectations of him at all during that tournament. He was about how I expected. But as far as if we'll see him this year, I think we will. It depends. I kind of thought we might call him up sometime around now, but I've been watching a lot of Springfield games lately, and he looks good, but I wouldn't say he looks NHL ready. So I think maybe that timeline gets pushed a little further back. Like, if the Blues are out of the playoffs and it's March 5th, I think Dvorsky comes up for the rest of the season, and I think that'll be really good for him because I don't think he's ready, and I think him getting an experience in finding out that he is not ready is going to be really, really good for him. And he's going to go into the summer and, he's going to have a big summer, and he's going to come back and know what it takes to succeed in the NHL next year. And I think he'll be here most of the year next year. But yeah, I think we're going to see him at some point. I'm not totally sure when that is. I think as long as the Blues are really contending for a playoff spot, I would be surprised if we saw him, which is fine. I mean, he's doing great in Springfield, and he's going to get there at some point.
For sure. Well, Sam, thanks for coming on. You want to let our viewers know, some that may have missed it at the beginning, where they can find you?
Yeah, just the at SDL Analytics Twitter handle. And then also, like I said, I've been teasing a website for a long time. That's going to get done at some point. It's just a matter of getting it to a way that I like it. And
Sure.
I think there'll be a Springfield Thunderbirds sort of statistics database. I've been tracking microstats, entries, exits, shot contributions, forechecking stuff for that team. It's been really fun. Get to really see the AHL players and prospects up close, which is cool. I've been posting a lot about that on Twitter, but I'll also make it publicly available at some point, some sort of Tableau database or website, once I get to a big enough sample. So be on the lookout for that. Really excited about that. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course. We're excited as
Yeah,
well. But yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in live. If you want to, follow along with us, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We go live at least once a week, very often twice a week. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to listen to audio. And we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at No News Pod, where we'll post, upcoming episode announcements and guests and fun graphics and videos, memes, all that kind of stuff. So follow us there if you want to check out more of what we do. But like I said, thanks for tuning in. We've got some important matchups coming up throughout the month of January for the wild card race. A back-to-back against Calgary this week. They play the Canucks and Utah this month. So it's a big one, and there will be some big stories to cover. And so we're going to be here to talk about all that. So be sure to tune back in for our future episodes. But yeah, thanks again, Sam. We'll see everyone next time. Thanks for watching Note News, everyone. But Alec, let's go Blues, baby.
Let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.